Stephen McNeil is the former Premier of Nova Scotia. He currently sits on the Prime Minister's Advisory Council on U.S.-Canada relations. Mr. McNeil, thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you. My pleasure.
So it's been a very fast-moving day, and the latest we now have is that Ontario is going to remove this surcharge because Howard Lutnick did reach out to the Ontario Premier and invited him to have a discussion about Canada-U.S. trade ahead of April the 2nd. What does that say to you? Does that say to you that the surcharge actually worked here, or that Mr. Ford is taking a step back?
No, I would say to you that it indicates that it's working. We knew all along that the tariffs the Americans were imposing on Canada were going to impact the American consumer much more than here. The 25% means costs in the U.S. going up 25%. And what Canada, both the Prime Minister, former Prime Minister, and the Premiers all indicated early on is that what they were going to do was match dollar for dollar on tariffs that would impact Americans, not so much Canada's economy. And what Doug did, or Premier Ford did, was actually basically follow Trump's lead and did a 25% on our energy being exported in the U.S., which means we were directly impacting American consumers. And ultimately, that's who's going to put pressure on the White House to talk to them about the lunacy of this policy, which is everything they're doing is only driving up costs in the U.S.
I think it's worthwhile to dig in with a bit of what you just said, because I think it's fair to say that there are many Canadians that are very worried about this moment. But when you say the tariffs that Donald Trump is going to impose on Canada will actually hurt Americans more, can you dig into that as to how that will persuade the American public to tell the president to step back?
Sure. Anything that we export into the U.S. is going up 25% because of the President of the United States is imposing his own tariff. He, in essence, is taxing goods that are going across the U.S. border to 25%, which means the American consumer is going to get that increase, whether it's potash from Saskatchewan, whether it is lobster from Atlantic Canada. He's driving up the cost by 25%, and that will be borne by American consumers because that cost will be passed on, which means cost take place in the U.S. Many Americans understand that, but we can talk about that all we want until they actually feel the impact of it, which I believe they have been over the last week. Then we'll start seeing some movement, I believe, in the U.S.
Okay, some movement, but how bad might this get before it's all over? Because to my understanding, the very threat of tariffs have had an impact on Canada's economy already, and it has already had an impact on Canadian jobs. So how bad can this get? What do Canadians need to be ready for when we talk about a trade war?
Well, first of all, you are absolutely right. Just talking about the threat of a tariff is impacting the Canadian economy. It's impacting investment within inside of our country. So just the conversation is already impacting employment and jobs. And I don't think we should underestimate the anxiety that people are feeling, worried about the next paycheck or worried about what's going to happen down the road. But what I can tell you is that Canadians are unified, understanding this was not something that was generated by the Canadian government. It wasn't something that was done by Canadian business. This was imposed on us as Canadians, whether it's in the public sector or private sector, by the U.S. president. And Canadians are galvanized and ready for what could be a long road. I also think we need to fully grasp and understand this is not going away just with President Trump. I think he's demonstrated a new wave of politics in the U.S. The MAGA movement will be around for a while. I think all the more reason why Canada needs to really diversify our economy and diversify our export partners. The U.S. will always be important to us, but they can no longer be in total control of what's the exports of this country. We need to go out into the world and find markets to do that.
Mm-hmm. Now, there has been a debate about adding an export tax or a surcharge in the parlance of the Ontario Premier on the things that we export to the United States, in particular Canadian energy and minerals. Given what has now happened in the last 24 hours, from the time Ontario introduced this surcharge to the reaction that we had from Donald Trump, to now this invitation by Howard Lutnick to the Ontario Premier to come and talk at the table, what does that say to you about the efficacy of that strategy and how widely spread it should be used?
Well, I'll leave that up to the premiers and the prime minister to decide what they're going to put future tariffs on. But I think clearly Premier Ford demonstrated that he was prepared to use all levers at his disposal. When you're talking about three American states that would have been heavily impacted by this tariff, that's a powerful tool to use. I don't think Premier Ford would have used that lightly. But let's face it, the president is attacking jobs all across this country and jobs in the U.S. And I think the decision by Premier Ford for him was the right one. We'll see how this all plays out. But I want to tell you, and I hope the American people fully understand this, that Canadians are galvanized. Canadians are in this for the long haul. This is not something that any Canadian government did. This isn't something that happened because if this is being imposed on us, and we will continue to demonstrate how strong Canada is, and there will be impact. Let's not minimize that. There will be impact, but in the long run, this is a call to action by all of us in terms of diversifying our trade portfolios.
Diversifying, and you do right now sit on the Prime Minister's Advisory Council. Of course, we're about to get a new Prime Minister when Mark Carney gets sworn in. What's your message to him? Because, Justin Trudeau had experience with Donald Trump thanks to the renegotiation of NAFTA. What's your message to Mark Carney, who may not have had these face-to-face dealings with the U.S. president?
So, listen, I was around as an elected official through Trump 1. I think this is very different now. There doesn't seem to be a level of guardrails on the president. But I think Prime Minister-elect Carney, while he may not have directly negotiated with the president, he's certainly been heavily involved in economic challenges at home and abroad. He'll fully grasp what's taking place, and I was very pleased to hear his comments the other night of being, we will match tariff for tariff. And I think one of the great lines that Prime Minister-elect used, our tariffs will not come down until the president starts showing Canadians respect. And ultimately, that's what this comes down to. If you want a deal, Canadians are ready to have a deal. We already have a free trade deal with the U.S., but it requires respect on both sides of the table. And Canadians right now do not feel that the President of the United States is respecting us. And until he does, I think the Prime Minister-elect, will have all the support of Canadians to continue down this path until he does.
Stephen McNeil, always appreciate the time. Thank you for that.
All the best. Thank you.